Hi Girl Scouts, this is Megan with the Girl Scouts of Central Maryland, and today we are going to be making the original Girl Scout cookie recipe. I don't know if many of you are in the same boat as I am, but I'm down to my last box of Girl Scout cookies, and clearly I need some more. So I decided that we're going to make the original recipe. So this recipe was published in 1922, but the first knowledge of Girl Scouts selling Girl Scout cookies was in 1917 by Girl Scouts in Oklahoma. Girls at that point were just kind of selling their own cookies at that time to help fund troop activities. And then in 1922, the Girl Scouts of the United States put out a recipe in the American Girl magazine with the recipe that is now known to be the first Girl Scout recipe. So that's the recipe that we're going to be following today. I'll be sure to put a link to the recipe that I'm using and as well as type it up. But I'm going to talk you through how to make these cookies. So we're going to need to get all of our ingredients together. So we're going to need for this recipe, we're going to need 1 cup of butter, which is also 2 sticks of butter. Our butter needs to be softened at room temperature. So my butter's been sitting out, it's at room temperature, it's not cold, it's pretty soft and mushy. We're also going to need 1 cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of milk, so I have my milk and a tablespoon, 2 eggs that are going to be well beaten, so I'm going to show us how to do that, a teaspoon of vanilla, 2 cups of flour, so I have my flour and my vanilla, and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So I have all of my ingredients laid out here and ready, and our very first step is going to be creaming the butter and the sugar. Alright, so now that we're ready, we're going to add our 1 cup of butter or 2 sticks of butter into our bowl. It should be nice and soft. Like that. So what we're doing right now is our first step is to cream the butter and the sugar. So I'm adding my 2 sticks of butter. They are softened. They've been sitting out on my counter for quite a while now, getting up to room temperature and nice and soft. And we're going to also be adding in 1 cup of sugar. So this should be 1 cup of butter and 1 cup of sugar. Measuring cup here for my sugar. Okay. 1 cup of sugar. We're going to keep our measuring cup out because we're going to need that again for the flour. Alright, and to cream butter and sugar, you could do it by hand with a whisk, but that's going to take a very, very, very long time. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my mixer to cream our butter and our sugar. Alright, so go ahead and get this going. So as you're creaming the butter and the sugar, we're starting to essentially get it into a nice creamy mixture. And as I'm doing this, I'm pausing it every once in a while to get the mixture out of the mixers on my hand mixer, just so that it's all getting nice and incorporated together. But as you do this, it's going to start to become creamy and less chunky. I'll go ahead and I'll show you what this looks like. but we're still not quite there yet. Need to keep going a little bit, but we're starting to mix it together. Alright, so once your butter is nice and creamy, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next step with the eggs. I'm going to go ahead and get all of the butter that might be sticking onto the handles off. Put this off to the side, and I'll wash that up once I'm done. But I'm going to go ahead and just kind of give it a nice little mix, make sure everything is well incorporated. And it should just look like kind of a very pale yellow, whitish kind of color. So our next step is going to be adding in our eggs, and ask for well-beaten eggs. So for this step, I'm going to get my whisk so that we can beat the eggs. And we want to do this in a bowl separate from our butter mixture. Go ahead and crack our eggs. Alright, so once you have your eggs cracked, you're going to go ahead and whisk them and beat them. You want them to essentially be all mixed and combined together. We don't want our egg yolks and our egg whites to be separated. We want them to all be nice and mixed together. So I'm going to take this with a whisk and just mix them up a little bit just for a minute or two until they are well combined. I have my eggs that are beating them all nice together. You can go ahead and you can see I'm just whisking it together so they're all combined. We want our yolks and our whites to be completely one together. We don't want to be able to see either of them separately. So once we do that, we're going to go ahead and add this into our mixture. Go ahead and dump that in. I'm going to give it a quick mix. Right. And then I'm going to go ahead and add just 2 tablespoons of milk. So I have my tablespoon. I'm just going to carefully pour this over top of the mixture, so if I accidentally get a tiny little splash over, it'll fall into my bowl. So I have 2 tablespoons of milk. So I'm going to go ahead and add 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So I have my teaspoon here. That's the smaller one. So teaspoons are small, tablespoons are big. I'm going to go ahead and add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract into this. Alright. And then I'm going to measure out our dry ingredients. I always do our dry ingredients in a separate container, give them a quick mix together so that they're nice and incorporated before adding anything into our dough that we're making. Get into our flour. So we want 2 cups of flour. And with flour, you want to make sure that it's not heaping over the top. You're going to use a finger or a tool to kind of level it off. So there's 1 cup, so yeah, it's pretty flat on the top. So 1 cup of flour. And second cup of flour. I always tend to make a huge mess when I'm using flour, but that's all right. That's the fun of baking. You get to make a little bit of a mess. And then we are going to need 2 teaspoons of baking powder. My regular teaspoon is wet now because I used that with the vanilla, so I'm going to go ahead and use a half teaspoon and do 4 scoops of this. And do 4 scoops of this into our mixture. 1, 2, 3, 4. And once that's all in the same bowl, I'm just going to give that a quick kind of mix together so that we can get that baking powder and that flour just kind of incorporated together. You always want to make sure your dry ingredients are mixed together before you add it to anything wet. The exception for this was with our sugar. We went ahead and already added that in when we were creaming the butter. But what we're going to do is we're going to slowly add this in and we're going to mix it together. This is the part where if you have a stand mixer, it comes in handy. Oh, just a quick little mix. I'm going to slowly add this in. A little bit. Mix it a little bit. Add a little bit more. Mix a little bit more. Adding it slowly makes it so that it's not going to poof over when you start to mix it. It also helps it kind of work together slowly. So go ahead, add the rest in once you get a little bit of that going. And mix that together until it forms your dough. So as I'm doing this, it's starting to form our cookie dough. And again, I'm just going to keep kind of mixing. I always am one to just really get in there with my hands when I'm baking things. I always like to make a mess when I'm cooking or in the kitchen. It's more fun that way when you get your hands dirty. Just keep on mixing this and mixing this. That you're scraping anything that's down at the bottom, getting all of that nice and incorporated. If you are using a stand mixer, you just want to pause it every once in a while and make sure nothing's getting stuck to the sides. So once it's all completely mixed together, we are actually going to let this set in the fridge for 1 hour. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and cover this with plastic wrap, let it sit in my fridge for 1 full hour, and then we'll be back to bake it. All right, Girl Scouts, so now that our dough is finished chilling in the refrigerator for about an hour, we're gonna go ahead and pull it out and get ready to roll out our dough to make our cookies. We are going to want to make sure that the surface that we're using is thoroughly covered in flour, so I have flour all over here. And your rolling pin or whatever you're going to use to roll out your cookies are also covered in flour. I personally don't have a rolling pin, so I'm going to be using just a cylindrical glass to roll out my cookies. You can also use different like a water bottle or something that's flat and round that you can use to roll out the same shape as a rolling pin. You're also going to want to make sure that your hands are covered in flour with this. You don't want anything to stick. If your cookies are a little sticky, you just want to work in a little bit more flour so that they're not sticking to things, but making sure that your surfaces are nice and covered is going to be a really good thing to help you through that. And I also keep my flour just sitting here nice and ready in case I do need to add more. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my dough, and I'm going to go and plop it down right here in the middle, and we're going to start to roll it out. And we want to make sure that it's not sticking, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of make sure that there's plenty of flour. Make sure that it's not picking up any of that flour below. I don't want it sticking to the countertop. And sprinkling it as needed. And begin to roll it out nice and evenly. We're going to want it to be about 1/8 of an inch thick once we're finished rolling it out. Gonna roll it, make sure it's not sticking. All right. As I'm doing this, I have my oven preheating at 375 degrees. It's kind of interesting that the recipe does not tell you what temperature to cook cookies at. The recipe from 1922 that was published by the Girl Scouts of the United States, it simply just says to cook it in a quick oven. So there are a lot of things, modern tips that people have learned while making these cookies. The original recipe does not tell you to chill the cookie dough, but when making sugar cookies and cookies like this, it always helps to chill that dough a little bit so it's easier and not as sticky when it comes time to roll it out. If I were to have rolled these out just right after I mixed it, it would have been a lot stickier and a little bit harder for me to make these cookies. So keep rolling them out. These cookies, when they were first started with Girl Scouts selling cookies, they sold for 30 cents, which is not a lot of money at the time. So they sold them for 30 cents for the box or whatever container that they were selling them out of, because they made them in their kitchen, so they might not have been selling them out of boxes. But 30 cents a box was the price to buy a box of Girl Scout cookies in 1922. All right. So now that my dough is all rolled out, we're going to go ahead and get our cookie cutter. I happen to have a trefoil cookie cutter, so I'm going to cut mine into trefoil shapes. And again, I'm going to make sure that my cookie cutter has plenty of flour on it as well. We want the cookie cutter to not stick to the cookies that we're cutting. All right, get that nice and covered, and we're going to start to cut out our cookies. If you don't have a trefoil cookie cutter, you can use whatever cookie cutters you have, or if you want, you can take a knife and very carefully try and trace out whatever shape cookie you would like to create. There, and add any flour. If I notice it start to stick, I'll add a little bit more flour to my cookie cutter to make sure that it is staying nice if your dough is really sticky, you might need to add some extra flour to the dough itself. That's okay. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully peel away, and I'm just going to use a spatula to lift it up. If it's getting a little sticky, use a spatula to lift it up, and we're going to go ahead and place them on our cookie sheet. So I'm going to fill my cookie sheet. Again, some parts of it might have gotten a little bit more stuck to your counter than others, and if they are really stuck, you can go ahead and just kind of discard that cookie and then roll them out again and get them going again. So, cover and sheet. Again, it might get a little sticky to your countertop. That's okay. It just means once you roll them out the second time, you're going to need to add a little bit more flour to the counter. As I'm pulling it away, I'm just making another ball of dough so that I can roll that out for the second time that I cut out cookies. We're just going to keep doing this until we've cut out enough cookies to cover our entire cookie sheet. And again, if it doesn't come up the way you want it, you can just go ahead and plop it to the side and save that dough for the next batch that you are rolling out and cutting out. Takes a little bit of time to get a full cookie sheet ready, but we're gonna work our way through and get our cookies going. So once your cookie sheet is covered with cookies, what we're going to do is we are going to get a little bit of sugar, and we're just going to simply sprinkle the sugar on top of these cookies and put them in the oven to bake for about 8 to 10 minutes, or until they're starting to get nice and golden brown around the edges. So my oven has been preheated to 375 degrees. Sugar sprinkled on top. And get these going in the oven. I set my timer for 8 minutes to start, and I can always add on time after if they're not quite done yet. So we'll check back and see in a couple minutes and see how they turned out. So once your cookies are starting to get nice and golden brown, right around the edges, kind of on the bottom of the edges, we're gonna go ahead and pull them out of the oven. My first batch seemed to take a little bit longer than the 8 to 10 minutes. I've had them in for about 12 minutes or so, but I would still keep them in for 8 to 10 minutes and start to check on them, just depending on how thick your cookie is and what's going on inside your oven. Might vary oven to oven and batch to batch. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull them out because they've been in here for about 13 minutes or so, and they're looking just about perfect. And go ahead, and there we have our cookies. So we pulled them out of the oven and we have our cookies. They did kind of get a little bit bigger. They didn't quite keep their trefoil shape, and my cookie cutter wasn't very defined, but I still think they're gonna be wonderful. And I'm gonna then, once they cool off a little bit, slide them onto the cooling rack and get going with my second batch.